But yeah, let's get going. So who lists a lot in here? Who would you say you're listing? Okay, great. Lots of experience with it. And the benefits, it gives you a more regular schedule. It'll give you more time on the weekends. It doesn't mean you're off on the weekends at all, but you certainly can kind of box in when you're working. You obviously have to respond to agents, but you kind of get your time back, right? You can get more predictable income. You should certainly know if I go on, 20 listing appointments, how many of these will I win? And then of those that I win, how many of those will I sell? If you're doing a great job, you will sell close to all of them. Sometimes people will change their minds, but whenever you're setting really strong expectations in terms of price, in terms of marketing strategy, you shouldn't lose very many listings, if any, at all. Most of the time that you lose listings, it's because of misset expectations out the gate. And you can certainly sell a whole lot more listing a lot than if you're working with buyers. And that's just by nature of how you service sellers versus how you service buyers. When I was listing heavily, my goal was to go to the house once. That was it. I'd go out there, I'd give them a listing presentation. I would spend usually an hour and a half when I was there, sometimes two, if we were going to go through comps together. But then after that, there's really no reason for me to ever go back there again. You're not doing that because you want to trade good service for your time. But if you really set expectations well, and if you really have your systems dialed, you just don't need to. You can really send people out for things. You have to spend some money. But if you have the volume coming in and you've set these expectations correctly, yeah, you get to work behind your computer a whole lot. So I'm being long-winded, which I always do, but that's equals more sales volume. If you have a lot of volume coming in, just because you don't have to get in the car with people. Pitfalls. So who's had a bad experience with sellers? Who's worked with sellers that just made your life hell I certainly did, right? Hey, I had one guy in particular. This is back when I was a much newer agent, and I didn't know what to do really. I mean, I was like, oh, if we get good pictures and put on the MLS, we'll probably sell. This guy was so anxious, and he just wanted me to do everything that he thought needed to be done. So second guessing my strategy, because at the time I didn't really have a strategy, right? So you have to make sure that you get in front of that. They're hyper aware of your compensation. That won't be as big of a problem as some people think. I used to get really nervous whenever it was time to go over that page that talked about how much money I was going to get. And I think after the NAR settlement, everybody in this room won't have that much anxiety anymore. But yeah, they're certainly aware of it. And they sometimes think that they're paying twice because they're paying you, plus they're paying the buyer's agent as well. So it just gets talked about a lot more. They can self-sabotage, they can say crazy things like, well, I have to get this amount of money. I can't take an offer this lower than that. And those are, valid questions. If you can't take less than this, then what's the option if we don't get that? But they can certainly self-sabotage. They can get mad if you get a repair request that doesn't look reasonable. So it's our job to get in front of that. It's our job to make sure that if they start becoming emotional, which happens, that we can keep their eye kind of on the prize. And they can certainly blame misfortune on you. And that's the big one that I think I certainly hated a whole lot, was whenever, something unlucky happened. And then they said to me well, why aren't you doing more? Why aren't you negotiating harder for me? Things like that. But you can get in front of all these things. So what's the number one goal when giving a listing presentation? It's not to get a signed listing agreement. I would posit that the number one goal is to earn their trust. And if you earn their trust, and you maintain that trust, then everything is going to work out. You've set a really great standard for the relationship. So whenever you give them solid advice in the future, they'll listen to you. You don't ever want to say things like, oh, well, I just know it's the right answer, so this is what we're going to do. You always want to back things up with data when you can. You always want to back things up. Stories, you can tell them cautionary tales. Those work really, really well. But if you have their trust, they will listen to you. And that's why the goal, whenever you're at a listing appointment, you've got 1.5 hours, 2 hours maybe, to earn their trust. And if you've done that, everything else is going to work out. They need to trust you that you're honest. If they don't think you're honest, if you come across as a slimy car salesman, it's probably not going to work very well. They need to trust your experience and your competency. So they need to know that they're in good hands. They need to know that you've got lots of experience. You've done this before. They need to trust your marketing system. If they don't, they'll ask you to hold an open house every weekend. And unless you like holding open houses every weekend, it's not going to be very fun. I had one guy that he would have had me in the front yard spinning a sign in a chicken suit, if I would have done it, right? They need to trust your pricing strategy. And we'll talk about that technique and why you never want to tell them that your house is worth exactly this to the penny, because nobody knows that. It's impossible to do that without a crystal ball. Overall, they need to trust that you're the best agent for them with the best system to reach their goals. And whenever we get to the listing presentation, whenever we get to the only page that talks about marketing, I say, look, we do everything that's effective. There's nothing else that we could do that's effective to sell your house. And that's a precursor to no, I'm not going to hold an open house every weekend because it's not effective. And then we do talk about open houses. And I feel like our open house strategy is very good. I'm not telling you it's the only way, but you need to talk about them. You need to talk about them at the listing presentation. Otherwise, if you get 3 weeks in and the house isn't selling, you're going to start swatting away open house, open house, open house. And I'm sure you guys have been there because I certainly have been there. Should you win every listing appointment? So no, if you win every appointment, you're taking bad listings. Not everybody is good. You're going to have sellers that you probably don't want to work with that come in some different flavors. Sellers that refuse to listen to reason whenever it comes to price. That's somebody that you probably don't want to work with. That doesn't mean that if they won't agree to your pricing that you should walk away from the listing, but look them in the eye and say, look, if we try this higher price and it doesn't sell at this higher price, we're going to come down, right? And if they say yes, then you're probably good. If you believe them when they say yes and you say right to the voice of reason, which is usually the woman, and then you say right to the guy and he'll like, and then finally say yes, then you have something you can go back to. There is an obvious question. Why don't you put this into the listing agreement? I actually asked Russ this. Russell Shaw, who I sent you guys the podcast on, he taught me this entire process. And he said, no, I wouldn't worry about putting it in the listing agreement. I said, well, why not? They can always back out of it. And it's really more about if you believe them whenever you say, we're going to go to the price that the market sets, right? Where I usually say no is whenever somebody digs their heels in and demands a low commission amount. So there was 1 year that I took every listing as long as we get at least 2% on our side. We had systems in place. We could operate profitably with all of those. And that was a year that I did a lot of production. And by the end of the year, I was like really burnt out, not having fun. And I looked back at everybody that I'd not had a good time with. And everyone that I didn't have a good time with had demanded 2%. A lot of them were shopping me against Redfin because they weren't my customer. They wanted the lowest commission amount they could get. They didn't want the best service and the best experience they could get. You can't have both, right? You can't offer the best service and best experience and be the cheapest. You have to pick one or the other. And so what I found was whenever it was a good listing and they said to me, hey, will you do it for less? I would say, why don't I meet you at 2.5? And that 0.5% doesn't mean a whole lot in terms of money, but it does mean a whole lot in terms of proving that they're willing to compromise and be reasonable. And I walked away. If they wouldn't do 2.5%, I would say, listen, I get it. If you want a better commission amount than that, I'm not your guy. I'm here to provide amazing service. And I truly hope you have an amazing experience with a cheaper agent. But I just walked away at that point. This is important. Consistency is key. And if you don't have a listing presentation that you are following 100% of the time, every time, use this one. Full stop. It's very proven. It works really, really well. If you have a listing presentation that you're using exactly the same time, that you're using every time exactly the same time, maybe you can take some stuff from this. But if it's working well for you, learn, iterate. But if you're not doing something exactly the same time every time, you need to. And this is from Russ. If you win listing appointments every time you wear a blue shirt, then just keep wearing that blue shirt, right? You should just do the same thing to get the same great results every time. We're done. This is selling on our specific listing presentation. I think it's more qualification than anything. This has over 12 years of use. It's over 1,000 closings, and we actively improve it all the time. And that's through our listing. That's through our listings team, our listing program. But these guys give it the same way every single time. And then, I meet with them a couple of times a year. And hey, guys, how can we improve this? Win percentage, about a third of the agents say they win 99% of the time. About 2/3 say that they win 90% of the time. And there's small sliver that says that they win about 80% of the time. Here is the process and presentation in a nutshell. So you have the initial phone call and information gathering. And that is whenever they call in or you call them, you need to talk to them and you need to find out what their motivations are. What's your timeline? And whenever you know what their timeline and their motivation is, as long as they're a reasonable person, you'll be able to help them strategize and the listing will sell. Whenever you talk to a seller, they're either going to have an open-ended timeline or they're going to have a timeline that's actually defined. And we obviously prefer the defined timeline, but you can advise in different ways whenever they have different types of timelines. The pre-listing appointment emails, that's what will take you guys probably 30 minutes initially. And then over time, you'll get to where you can whip them out in 5 to 10 minutes. We have some cool tech that we're working on right now that'll have ChatGPT start writing these for you guys, and that'll save a lot of time as well. But right now, don't skimp on the pre-listing emails. Send them a lot of good information. And you'll hear a lot of good coaches say you need to have a pre-listing packet for your clients. And that is a good strategy, but the emails work better because you can track the emails. So it's the same information and you're linking out to good resources for them. And then you know what you're walking into. So if you send them the emails and they haven't clicked on anything, then you know, hey, we're probably walking into something without any sort of prep on their side. And that's fine. It doesn't mean it's going to be bad. If they engage heavily and they're clicking on everything before you go there, oh, that's great because you have a leg up. You know that they've read a lot of the resources. They're going to be more educated whenever you guys start talking with them. And most agents don't do this. In the same way that most agents don't spend very much time setting up searches for their buyers, most agents just go, okay, cool, I'll meet you on Wednesday. And then that agent may or may not show up even with a listing presentation. So these 2 pre-listing appointment emails just set the standard for the relationship. You're going to go to the house. You're going to give a listing presentation. You're going to give the post-presentation pricing email. Then you're going to get the signed listing agreement. Not every time, but most of the time you're not going to ask them to sign it at the table. The only time that I ever asked somebody to sign it at the table was whenever they were just ready. No, we want to sign it right now. Are you sure? Okay, great. Let's go ahead and sign it. Most of the time you're going to tell them, hey, it's a big decision. Please look everything over. Let me know whenever I can follow up with you and we can get the listing agreement signed. And then you're going to engage the stager and you're going to start the process. You have to start spending money whenever you engage the stager. It's very reasonable for you to tell any potential client, I need to have some signed paperwork before we do this. Initial phone call and information gathering. What's the property address? What's your timeline? Why are you selling? And then set the listing appointment. Craig McGuire, he'll text me like, I got him, man. So he didn't get the listing. He just set the appointment because he knows that if he has the appointment set and they're a good seller, he's going to win. And that's just because he has a lot of experience in doing it. So just know that when you're on the call, try not to get off the call without actually setting the appointment. Oh, I need to look at my calendar. Are you sure? We can just pull them up right now. That's the only sort of pushy-ish sales tactic that we do. But I tell myself it's in their best interest because I'm protecting them against all these bad agents they might run into. So you're doing God's work whenever you set the listing appointment on the first call. So this is email number 1. And I have it on the screen here so that you guys can kind of see. I'm not going to read through the whole thing. I'm just going to talk to you about it. So you'll see these big squigglies. Insert elevator pitch. Who has their elevator pitch? Who can tell somebody in 30 to 60 seconds who they are and why they should work with you? Everybody? Okay. It's your homework if you don't have that. You should be able to explain to somebody and not sound salesy why they should work with you, right? Yeah. These sound like brags. And most of the time, everybody here, we all share in the common goal of we check our egos at the door. But again, if you want to do God's work and protect them from all of these bad agents, set up your elevator pitch. You just need to explain to them without becoming too salesy. And it's right here. There's a few links about my team or about you. You want to be able to link to your reviews. That's going to qualify you. It's other people that are talking about you and your great service. If you don't have a lot of reviews online, that's another effort, right? It doesn't mean you shouldn't go on listing appointments. It just means that should always be kind of like a passive goal that you have, is to get as many reviews as you possibly can. At some point, you kind of reach this critical mass of reviews where a lot of times you show up and people are pre-sold. Russell talks about in the podcast that you need to be able to explain to anybody why they should work with you, whatever your unique qualities are. If you're on a team, why it's best to work with you because you're on a team. If you're a newer agent, nobody here is going to be that new, but why you've been able to sell a whole lot in a shorter period of time. That goes back to your elevator pitch, but you need to be able to explain to them why you're the best person to work with them, and then having these reviews is going to back it up. This is where the process comes into play, and you'll just see there's a lot of links to the website with a lot of assets there. Hopeful that they click through on these, because if they click through on these, it's literally the listing presentation you're going to give them, and it's going to step them through the process, and it's going to show them that you know your stuff, right? I look forward to meeting you on insert day, insert time. I usually bold that just to make sure that you're confirming as well. And that's email number 1. Email number 2. This is the email that can take a little bit of time, but you'll get to where you can knock it out in 5 to 10 minutes. Rough comps and stats. So this is what they care about the most. And I would see some people that wouldn't click through on the processes email, but they would click through on this. What's my house worth? I mean, Zillow's built an entire multi-billion-dollar company over answering that question incorrectly. Rough comps and market stats for property address. You're telling them the criteria that you're using, right? You're in Allendale. It's a 2,000 square foot house. So this is only in Allendale. It's plus or minus, I would use like rough percentages a lot, plus or minus 10%, plus or minus 15%. If year built looks relevant, the year built. You'll find a lot in a lot of neighborhoods that 2-story houses don't comp well with 1-story houses. So if the comps exist, and we can do a whole class over pricing sometime, you're going to hear me say it depends a whole lot whenever we talk about that. But you explain your criteria. You're letting them inside. You're letting them know your thought process. And then you're saying, here's the price range. The CMA stats in the email also includes market statistics. Right now, there's X months of inventory. Average time to sell is, and then insert comments about the market. So right now, at this time of the year, because most people calculate inventory looking at the past 3 months of sales and then the current number of listings that are on the market, you're going to see it shift. But right now, a lot of neighborhoods look like there's not a lot of inventory. But whenever you also show them the number of days on market, that doesn't look so great. So it'll say right now there's 3 months of inventory and it's 95 days to sell on average. This means that you're in a balanced market that leans towards sellers that is taking a bit longer to sell. We can talk more about it at the appointment, but that often happens at this time of the year. So you're not just barfing a bunch of stats on them that they might be able to find elsewhere. You're also explaining to them what it means. Statistics are great whenever you can present the statistics and then make complex stats easy to understand. And that should be your goal. Put it all in context. There's another link. I look forward to meeting you on day time. You're doing that again. When you're ready to schedule a listing appointment, hopefully you don't have to use that one very often. Hopefully you are just confirming the appointments. You're going to bring this to the listing appointment as well, but this is what the CMA link looks like. And this is our tool in our back end. And what we did was we used to glom together a whole bunch of tools in Matrix and we put them all into one. So you're going to see that there's a range, there's low, high, average, and median. We generally gravitate away from average and median, but it is important to have it there. Excuse me. You can see that this one, the low's 1.2 million and the high is 3 million. The way it got there is that I comped out my old house, which was a 3,000 square foot house in Allendale that was not brand new. And there's new construction there. And the reason I chose to include the new construction is because the number of resales that were that big, there just weren't enough. So we weren't presenting enough data. You want to give them a range. They're going to start thinking about where they fall within that range. And whenever you meet with them, you can point out that there's a lot of new builds right here and we can start putting things into perspective. Just flashing through some of the screens that they'll see. This is important right here. Whenever you show them the map, they're physically seeing that these comps are like right by their house. And if they disagree for some reason, oh man, the properties that are to the east of Shoal Creek are a lot nicer because of the hills. Oh, really? That's great to know. They start telling you these things. They can see it in person. This is, I think, kind of a pretty chart. It just shows them the timeline of what's happened to listings. Like, is it trending up? Is it trending down? Unfortunately, for the past couple of years, it usually kind of trends down if you're looking at 12 months, but not a ton. And then market stats. This is one of my favorite pages. This is the listing presentation. So we've done all of this stuff leading up to this, and this is the blue shirt. This is what you want to do the same way every single time. You want to walk the property thoroughly, because if you don't walk the property, it'll come back to bite you. They're going to come back whenever you're talking about pricing and say, oh, well, you didn't even see everything. And I'm going to play 10 minutes of Russ's podcast in a second. He talks about it more. Meet at the kitchen table. I thought that was goofy whenever I first heard it. Oh, I can do it on the couch. I can do it over here. After trying to give listing presentations at a kitchen counter, while you're standing there, after trying to do it on the couch, we've got it over here. Unless the property's vacant, at which point we're going to go to Starbucks nearby to give the presentation where there is a table, we're going to do it at the kitchen table. And that's because you can sit there and you can pass things back and forth and you can show them these things. It just sets the stage. You're going to go through the seller's guide. That's our pamphlet that we have available for you guys to buy. You're going to go through pricing and statistics. Then you're going to go through the listing agreement. And you want to go through every page of the listing agreement, but do it pretty quickly. And then you're going to dwell on special provisions, and I'll talk about why in just a minute. All right. So I'll sit down for a second, and hopefully this will play where everybody can hear it.
The first thing is when I go, this is where there's an appointment time. The first rule is be on time. And when I knock on the door, and I always knocked on the door, I did not ring the doorbell. I don't know, just this thing that I just worked better. I knocked on the door, and when they answered, and I'm a big guy, now I'm down to 280, but I normally weigh around, I've been weighing around 300 pounds. So when they answered the door, I would step back. If you're a 100-pound woman, do you need to step back? Probably not. If you are a big or tall man and they answer the door, step back. You do not want to overpower someone with, look how big I am. If you're hoping to find a way to get them to not do business with you, that one works perfectly. Overpower them with how big you are, and they'll find someone else to do business with because you'll make them feel small. So the first thing I would do is step back. Next thing, I would say their name. I would always say their name and wait for them to say yes. I already knew their name. I knew it was that person, but I wanted to get my first yes. So I would say their name. Mr. Hyben? Yes. May I come in? There's my second yes. Then what I'm looking for is where I'm going to sit, where I'm going to do the presentation. It is never, never, never going to be on the couch in the living room. Never. Unless the seller is legally blind, and I mean fully and can't see at all, I'm not sitting in the living room. If they have eyes and can see, we are going to sit at a table, and if they need to clean a table or clear it of crap, I'll wait. We are sitting at a table, or I couldn't possibly do what I call a presentation.
Okay.
So I'm looking for the table, and then once I find the table, I'm looking for where I'm going to sit. Now that's critical to me because I do not want, let's say, a rectangular table with husband at one end, a wife at the other end, and me in the middle so I can look back and forth at them. So I need to be where I can see both of them without turning my head, and my listing presentation manual is going to be something that lays flat on their table so I can turn the pages. I already know what it says, so I can read it upside down because I'm not really reading. I'm just talking about what's on that page as I flip it. As an important point, I use an Ibuco binder. The reason I say an Ibuco spiral binder is I detest bookbinder type presentations. I think they're awful. I don't think any agent should use them for anything. You cannot open them and have them lie flat. And unless you're hoping just to impress people with crap you send out and not actually have it be functional, use a binder that lets it open up and lay flat.
Okay.
While I'm on that point, do we have a pre-listing package? Yes. So you're going to want something that when you first start, your listing presentation manual and your pre-listing package is really the same thing. As you get going, you'll want to change that. But when you first get going, you can use them interchangeably. But lays flat. So the first thing I'm looking for is where I'm going to sit. Let me go back to that. Where I'm going to sit. And I asked them, may I put my briefcase here? And I literally put my briefcase where I'm going to sit, in that chair. That's number one. That's all that stuff was to get to that point of where is my briefcase going to go. And then I don't sit down, but I say, may I see the house? And even if you do a lot of listing appointments and you work in a neighborhood where you go, hell, I've seen that model 50 times. I don't need to see it. Yes, you do. A failure to go look at the house when you later try to talk price, the first thing they'll say is, but you haven't seen my house.
So how much time are you spending to the house, would you say? Or that you're
as much as is necessary, because this is where I do my ice-breaking communication. I want them to see me see the house. I open every closet. I open every closet. If they have an older home with shower curtains, I pull the shower curtains back. I want them to see me see the house. I don't give a damn about seeing it. I want them to see me see it.
Right.
And I comment if there's something that needs to be fixed, needs to be changed, needs to be modified, needs to be moved. I tell them, I say, may I speak frankly? And I just start telling them about it. You're going to want to probably fix that. You're going to want to move this. That shrub should be trimmed. It would be better if those boxes weren't there. Whatever the hell it is. Tell them. I just tell them. I've heard people say, well, I'll wait till they list it with me. But I'm there to interview for a job. I might not get another shot at that. So I want to seem as impressive as possible. And sometimes we don't know. We took one, we didn't even know we were in competition. And here's something else. Always assume you're in competition, even if you think they're not talking to anybody else. You don't really know that, but pretend like they're talking to other agents and handle your presentation and the way you talk to them accordingly.
Yeah, you're always.
That's a really valuable point of view. So I want to tell them everything I can to make me stand out, to make us stand out of why they should do business with us. Then when I get back to the table and I sit down, I will usually ask for a glass of water. It doesn't matter whether I'm thirsty. What I want to see, this is when I personally did it, who gets the water or who tells the other one to get the water for me. Because I wanted to see who the decision maker is.
So the decision maker gets the water?
Or tells the other one. The decision maker, like if the wife says to the husband, Herb, get him a glass of water. Well, I already know she's in charge.
Right. But if Herb gets up and gets it himself, then you know Herb's in charge.
Maybe. I don't know. It depends. I just want to see the dynamics there. I just want to see the dynamics, and I can always use a little water. So that's part of it. Then I go through my presentation manual, which is essentially what you're going to see in that pre-listing package.
Yes.
But it's on a different
page. Yeah.
Literally. And the first thing, while you're not discussing the price yet, what I'm doing is I'm going through all of the reasons they should do business with me.
I'm going to dig into the actual listing presentation next, but I cannot overemphasize how important it is to go through the actual listing presentation every time. Jeremy Vandermas is really good at listing presentations. And I asked him, like, whenever he was just winning, I mean, very quickly, almost every appointment he went on, I was like, how did you nail this? And he said, well, he's an actor for a long time. Like he has an IMDb and all this stuff. And he said, yeah, it's just a script, man. I just do it the same way. I just do it the same way every time. I don't think he would mind that I'm sharing this, but he was saying how bad of a time he was having with some sellers. And I was like, man, that really stinks. And it was really clear very early in the conversation that they didn't trust him. It wasn't that they didn't trust him as a person. It was just that they didn't really trust his process or trust marketing and all this stuff. And I say, did you give him the listing presentation? Did you go on a listing appointment? And he said, no, they were past clients. And so, we just signed the listing agreement and we moved on. And I was like, man, if I can give you some advice, tell them you're really sorry that you didn't give them a listing presentation, and ask if you can go over there and do it. And most of the time you don't get that shot. Most of the time, if you start going down a path of, not a lot of trust, it's really hard to gain it back. It was lucky that it happened, but he went and gave them the listing presentation, and then it kind of fixed everything. He showed them everything he was doing. He corrected it. He had their trust, and it worked out. So my rule, if I have sold, not rep to buy side, if I have listed and sold for more of their properties, more than 2 of their properties, so 3 or more, then I will not give the listing presentation. But if I have not sold at least 2 for them, I'm going to give it to them. And there were times that I would give somebody a listing presentation and then they didn't sell it. They just didn't ever list. And then they came back to me 3 or 4 years later, and I still went back to their house and I still gave them the presentation. It's the best investment you can make of your time, because it's going to set the stage for a really good relationship. I won't go over the walkthrough pretty thoroughly because Russ did such a good job. I won't over sit at the kitchen table for the same reason. I will do my best to rattle this off as smoothly as I used to be able to. It's been about a year. This is the seller's guide. And before you get into pricing, you're going to go over every page with them. And there might be some things that they're sitting there nodding and they clearly read about it. And you're like, you get this. This makes sense. And if they say yes, then you can move on to the next one. But you're confirming that they understand every page in the book. Why list with Bramlett Partners? Hey, look, this is a lot about my company. I want to tell you about my experience and what I've done. I've been an agent in Austin for 22 years. I was an ABJ winner. I've sold a number of properties in your neighborhood. You qualify yourself, right? And I'm not telling you this because I'm bragging. I'm telling you this because it's really important to know about who you're working with. Are you interviewing other agents? You are. Great. Just make sure and look at their qualifications, because there's a lot of agents out there that don't do a whole lot of business. And that's the only time I'll go negative on the entire appointment. But you don't want to look at this and read this verbatim. You want to know what your elevator pitch is, and you want to give them your elevator pitch, because they don't care about Bramlett Partners, guys. They care about you. Who are they working with? Tell them who you're working with. If you want to modify this listing presentation, I would love to see you guys put a resume in the first page, because then they know exactly who they're working with. And if you're having a hard time qualifying yourself, let's talk, because I think you probably can come up with really good reasons why you're a really experienced agent and they should work with you. We have fair listing agreement terms in every one of our contracts. Every one of these terms is to get in front of common problems that I see people have with agents. The first is that you can cancel anytime. So I'm going to ask you to sign a 1-year agreement here, but just know that if you ever change your mind, you don't want to sell the house, or if you ever decide I'm not the right agent for you, you can cancel at any time. I have seen agents that will put people in long listing agreements, and if they try to get out of the agreement, the agent says, no, you can't do it. And I never want anybody to work with me because they're handcuffed to me. I want people to work with me because I'm the best agent for them. So just know that we have an easy cancellation clause. No double dipping. Are you guys familiar with what double dipping is? It's whenever the listing agent has an unrepresented buyer, and instead of earning 3%, they go, oh, cha-ching, now I get to earn 6. I'm never going to do that, guys. I represent you. I'm here to act in your best interest. I don't want you to ever think that I have an ulterior motive. And if all of a sudden there's a contract I'm presenting where I earn twice as much, you're probably not going to trust me as much. So I'm never going to earn more than 3% on your contract. And there's no under commission. So if you end up selling this to somebody from church, a neighbor down the street, and I didn't do anything, then we can just walk away from each other, or you can keep me in the transaction for 1%. I don't want you guys to ever be in a situation where you feel like I didn't earn my keep. I didn't keep up my part of the deal. This happened to me, maybe it would not happen once a year. And this is going on tons of listing appointments, getting lots and lots of listings, usually maybe every couple of years. I will tell you that you will win more listing appointments because of this than you will ever lose. And whenever you do have it happen, it will happen at some point. You will build so much goodwill that it pays you back in spades. And these are provisions, guys, that if you asked any reasonable agent in Central Texas, hey, you'll get the listing if you add these provisions, any reasonable agent is going to say, yeah, just add them in there, right? We put them in there up front because you'll end up winning more listing appointments because of them. And remember, the goal is to earn trust. And they look at this and they go, oh, wow, what a reasonable guy. He really is looking out for my best interests. And they're fair. Sold a house before? You ever sold a house in Texas before? And sometimes you'll get, well, I've sold one. Sometimes you'll get sold twice, usually not more than that. Sometimes you get 0. Great. Well, the process is going to be relatively the same, but I want to walk you through everything that I do for you. So it starts with pre-listing preparation. We're actually doing that right now. We've already walked the house. I can promise you the stager is going to recommend decluttering, probably some landscaping. But after we sign the listing agreement, then we'll bring the stager in, and then we'll start working on professional photography. We're going to finalize our pricing after that because it's going to take us at least a couple of weeks to get the house ready, and we're going to make sure that we look at the comps again, see if anything else has happened in the market. Doing all of this work leading up to it is a lot of work. It really is like a big part of the listing. As soon as it's ready to go live, you're going to get maximum exposure. You're going to have a QR code that is on the sign outside. We're going to put you in the MLS. That gets you tons and tons of exposure. Have a single property website. That's so people can share it very easily. We're submitting it to the RESO RETS feed. That gets you on all the competitor websites and Zillow, things like that. The end result is that there's nowhere out there that makes sense that we could put your property. The only real estate related sites where your property will not be listed are going to be on new construction sites. They're not interested in marketing that. But just know that you're going to have maximum exposure. After we're on the market, we're obviously going to hope that we sell the property really quickly. I want that to happen for you guys. I know you guys want that. Average is 90 days right now. So there's a decent chance that it could take a little bit. There's a decent chance that we might have to discuss pricing in the future, but we're going to follow the market. And we're going to track your success. You're going to get automated emails from us weekly. That's going to show you what's happening in the market. You're going to get weekly property. You're going to get weekly traffic reports. That's going to come from some of our back office. You're going to get real-time showing notifications. So, you guys live in the house, so you're going to know when people want to show it, but you're going to see when people are accessing the property, so you can feel good about knowing what's going on. And then you're going to get real-time feedback reports. So we're going to try to collect feedback from every agent that shows the property. And I can tell you we get feedback from a little less than half of them, but we try to get feedback from everybody. Once we have an offer come in, I am not here to pressure you at all. I'm not going to show up to your house and put the contract in front of you. As soon as the offer comes in, I'm going to let you guys know. I'm going to either text you or email you, hey, here's the offer, but I'll have a detailed email to you that evening, and it's going to break down all of the terms, and it's going to show you guys what you're going to net at the end of the day. Not after the mortgage, but it'll show you what you're going to get after the fees. After we go under contract, about 10% of contracts fall through. because we have to get through the option period. That's the inspection where they're going to try to negotiate some repairs no matter what. And then there's some other things that can go wrong between then and the end of then and the closing date. And just know that we're tracking all of those things for you. We're not going to give you like a real-time update of everything that happens in the contract because there's 100+ things, but we're going to stay in really close communication until we're through the inspection. And then once we're through the inspection, I say about 96, 97% of contracts close once you're through the inspection. But just know that we will have a round 2 of negotiations after we come to terms on price the first time. Property preparation and home staging. So I can't overemphasize how important this is. We want to make sure that you guys do the high ROI items on your house before we bring the photographer in. So we've already talked about decluttering, landscaping. Those are just no-brainers. And more than likely, there'll be some touch-up paint. There's going to be a checklist that comes from the stager. So if we decide to work together, that would be the next step, is we would set up that appointment and you'll get a checklist. You'll know exactly what you need to do. We already know your timeline, but because you will have some preparation work in front of you, we'll circle back again and we'll solidify the timeline at that point in time. I would just ask them if they have any questions over staging. And then as agents, another business decision that you will have to make. The success rate, I think, in Austin right now is like 70%. So that means 1 in 3 are not going to sell. So it's an additional variable that you guys will have to know before you walk into the house. And you have to know before you walk into the house whether or not you're going to offer to pay for vacant staging, because that obviously gets very expensive. And you will have to have a discussion about who pays for it if it goes beyond 2 months or 3 months. And the worst time you can negotiate fees or commission is whenever they ask you. You need to know what you're going to do before you walk into it. We're bringing a professional photographer. We want to make sure the property looks amazing online. And then by submitting it to the RESO feed, you guys are going to be on every competitor's website in Austin. Again, it'll be everywhere that buyers shop. We don't have to worry about exposure in any way, shape, or form. Our marketing strategy, it revolves around a single property website. So we're going to have a QR code on the sign outside. We market directly to buyers, we market to buyers' agents, and we market to your neighbors and to your neighbors' friends. So marketing directly to buyers is really straightforward. As we talked about, we want to make sure on Zillow, we want to make sure that you're on all of our competitors' websites, you're everywhere that buyers shop. Agent to agent, by putting us on the MLS, we're going to get exposure to every agent in Austin. I've been doing this for a long time. I know a lot of agents, so I'm going to let all my friends know about the listings. And you would not believe how much time agents spend on Facebook. So we will make sure and carpet bomb this on all of the Facebook groups so that everybody knows that it's coming soon and everybody knows whenever it's on the market. Marketing to your neighbors and to their friends. So we have a QR code outside, and we have social media ads and posts that we put online for you guys. So at the end of the day, guys, we're hitting every segment of the market that could care about buying your house. So a couple of years ago, assumed that we were going to get multiple offers on pretty much every listing. And unfortunately, that's not the case anymore, but we're going to go to market and do everything we possibly can to get multiple offers. So what we're going to do is we're going to prepare the property first. We'll talk about timeline, and then we'll start pre-marketing the home either the weekend before or the Monday before. We're always going to list the property on either a Wednesday or a Thursday. And I'll explain why by telling you how not to list. If you put the property on the market on a Saturday, all of the email marketing goes out on Sunday morning. And if you have a buyer who's motivated and wants to see it that day, can you be confident that all or most of the motivated buyers looked at the house on that Sunday? No. If you put it on the market on Wednesday, the emails go out on Thursday morning, and you can be sure that every buyer who is motivated will get into the house that weekend. There'd be exceptions. Somebody's on vacation or whatnot, but we'll talk about timing and how we can try to prevent that. We're trying to focus as much demand as we possibly can into a short period of time. Because if you get an offer on the property on Friday, you can usually get somebody to wait for a response until Sunday, usually. If you get an offer on Sunday, can you ask them to wait until the following Sunday? It's not going to work. So we're always going to list your property on a Wednesday or Thursday. We're going to have open houses the first weekend. And the reason for that is we want to make sure that if you have a motivated buyer and their agent is out of town, that buyer can get into the property that weekend. It's also going to create a lot of appearance of demand. So a lot of your neighbors are going to show up to the open house. Any buyers that are there, they don't know who they are. So it looks really, really active. So it creates this appearance of scarcity and high demand and whatnot. And so buyers that are motivated are more likely to give you an offer that first weekend. So we're preparing and encouraging multiple offers in the best way that we possibly can. Does that make sense? I forgot. That's where I screwed up. Does that make sense? Is how I put a period on literally everything with these guys. If we get multiple offers, you want to set a deadline that allows plenty of time, but it needs to be reasonable. You want to update your multiple offer status online. You want to keep any specific details of the property of the offers confidential. And we want to coach up good offers. And what I mean by that is that sometimes you might have one offer that's a little bit higher that has not great terms. And so you can either coach up that offer to better terms, or you can go back to the other offer that already had great terms and say, hey, if you just go up a little bit, it makes our decision really easy. But we don't want to look like we're shopping offers against each other. These are things that I will be able to help you with just through experience and feel by having done this a whole lot. Sleep on it, guys. Like most of the time, unless you have an offer that's so insanely high, you want to sleep on it. Usually you'll know what the right move is after that. And the non-winning offers, you want to ask them if they want to put a backup in. So a backup offer increases your leverage position for the offer that wins. Whenever people compete in multiple offers and they end up offering more, there's a higher likelihood of buyer's remorse. And the way that manifests is whenever they come back for repairs, they're going to ask you for more repairs than they probably would have otherwise. If we have a backup, then it increases your leverage and you're able to say, sorry, no, we have a backup. What I've done with all of this is I've set expectations that they're going to give repairs, right? Even if there's not a multiple offer, we've told them that you're going to have repair negotiation on any offer. And even though we all know that multiple offers are not likely right now, you've shown them your expertise and you've shown them that you're doing everything you possibly can. You're not phoning it in. Make sense? If we don't get multiple offers, we don't sell on the first weekend. Trust me, I hope that I sell every one of my listings on the first weekend, not because I like easy money, but because I love 5-star reviews, okay? But if we don't get multiple offers or sell the property on the first weekend, we're going to continue to stay in contact with you. This is where things can feel a little bit weird. Like we listed the house and now it's 2 months later and what's going on? Well, you're going to hear from me on a weekly basis. You're going to hear from me in real time whenever the property is shown. And we use listing management and support for this. And so this is just me kind of telling you that you will hear from some of our staff. And if you hear from them, they're really good. But if you ever have questions, just reach out to me directly. I'm not ever passing you off to anybody else. I'm your main point of contact, but just understand that you'll hear from some other folks. Typical seller closing costs. I won't run through every single one of these, but the broker fees are the highest. If you take all these and put them together, it's going to be about 7.5% in total. It'll actually be a little bit less than 7.5%, but I like to tell people 7.5%. That way, you smile whenever you see the result rather than feel like you were shorted. If you'd ever like to see a net sheet, I'd be happy to put it together for you. But whenever we're doing napkin math on any offers that come in, we can just multiply 92.5% times the sales price, and that's what you're going to bring home. Now, there can be differences. Sometimes an agent might take less. Sometimes the buyer might ask for closing costs, but just know that I'm going to put together a detailed email for you. And if we have 2 offers in front of us and the terms are different, I can always show you how it'll net out differently to you. Prorated taxes. So do you guys escrow your taxes or not? What's that mean? Well, have you ever written a check at the end of the year for your property taxes? No, I haven't. Okay, great. So what's going to happen is you're going to have 7.5% in total fees, and then you're going to have to pay taxes at closing. But don't worry, you're going to get the remainder back within about 30 days after closing. But I just don't want you to be surprised whenever we look at the net sheet. When we look at the settlement statement, and the settlement is less than 92.5% to you, and that's because of taxes. But again, you'll get it all back. If you do pay property taxes at the end of the year, just know that you have accrued all of these tax obligations. And a lot of people don't realize this, but you pay taxes in arrears. So if it's June 30th, that means that you owe 50% of 2025 taxes. And so you just have to settle that up at closing. All right. So now that we've gone through our process, now we're going to get to the good stuff, right? We're going to talk about pricing. And I want to start by explaining how my pricing process is different than most agents. So most agents are just going to send you a CMA and they're going to say, this is about what the house is worth. And that's going to be it. And now we certainly start with a CMA and we certainly look at a CMA, but we're going to go a little bit deeper than that. So we start with the CMA. And then we look at market conditions, because if a market's appreciating, you don't want to price it with the homes that just sold. You might be able to go a little bit higher. If the market is going down, you don't want to chase the market down. It's strategic to maybe price it a little bit lower. But that's why we look at market conditions. Market Most people haven't. Most people don't. That's the easiest way to understand seasonality, is it's the most convenient to move in the summertime. And so people start preparing for that in the spring. And the seasonality in Austin is like clockwork. It's much busier in the spring. And then there's just a steady decline from about late April until the end of the year. So we're going to look at what time of the year it is, and we're going to take that into account whenever we come up with our pricing strategy. The most important element are your priorities and expectations. So I already know, what your timeline is, and I'll have to make up a timeline. I already know that you're moving to Dallas in 3 months, and you're not in dire straits. You don't have to sell this, but you probably don't want 2 payments. So we need to take that into account. On the flip side, if you talk to somebody and they say, look, I know that you want to sell this house and it would be much more comfortable for you. But yeah, we can talk about what you're willing to sell it for, and if there's some floor that you're not willing to go below. But it'll be part of our overall pricing strategy. It's not just going to be, here's a number, we think we're going to get this. Make sense? Understanding the market. So this will show you how you can calculate absorption rate, how you can calculate months of inventory. And if you like math, please look it over. But just know that inventory is calculated by months. And that doesn't mean that's how long it's going to take to sell your home. It shows how much inventory is out there. And if the absorption rate stays the same, it's how many months it would take for all of the inventory to be absorbed. Our system just calculates it for you. And as we discussed, right now, you have 3 months of inventory. And if you look right here, that means that you're in a balanced market that leans towards the sellers. But it's important to also understand that the average time on market is 95 days right now. And we're going into a busier time of year, and there seems to be more inventory hitting the market than demand is out there. That's another reason why we want to monitor this, make sure we get it right. And then here's seasonality. So this is the overall Central Texas market. And I included statistics for you that'll show that in your zip code, it's similar. It's not going to follow this exact same trend, but it's going to be similar. And the gist of it is that people don't like to move during the holidays, and they don't like to move whenever school starts. Given all of this information, just understand that the timeline will depend on you, but in general, it's going to take us 2 to 4 weeks to get the property staged, prepare it for market. Then it's going to take us another week or 2 to get pics of the home, and then we'll be able to get it on the market. So we're going to be anywhere from, call it 3 to 6 weeks after you've made your decision on if you want to work with me or not, to get you on the market. And that's realistic timing, guys. And you're also helping them understand why it's in their best interest to make a decision, not to drag their feet. Because if they call you and they want to list the house, they're not listing it tomorrow. You're probably listing it, 3 to 6 weeks later. I call this the interlude. So this is whenever you go into comps. This is whenever you go into market statistics. And I don't think that you have to do it exactly this way, but it worked for me for a long time. So here's the old MLS listing, and here are the county records. And I just wanted to show this to you to make sure that I got it right. So the old MLS listing shows 2,700 square feet. We talked on the phone. You told me it was 3,000. So I went ahead and put comps in at 3,000 square feet. Just wanted to confirm that that's right and get them to nod their head. Yes, it's right. Now we've all agreed that these statistics we're looking at are correct. This is what I emailed over to you. Did you have a chance to look at everything before I came? We didn't look at it very much. Okay. So it's going to be really important. Right now we have 8 sold listings. You want to find 1 to 3 that are really good comps. You don't need 8, 10, 12 listings to be able to make, a determination on pricing. Do you ever follow your estimate? A lot of people do. The reason why they can't come up with a better valuation tool than that is because real estate is so unique. So we like to look at things in terms of a range. We like to look at the low and the high. And if you look right here, it's a huge range. So your house will sell for anywhere between $1.2 and $3 million. Sound good? Great. This is why we need to look at this, and we need to come up with 1 to 3 solds, and then we want to look at the actives, and we want to take everything into context whenever we do it. Here's some averages, here's some ranges. Just know that this is here for your review. The email that I sent you, you can actually click through and look at every single listing. I would highly encourage you to do that. And if you have time to look at all the listings and then find 1, 2, or 3 that you feel like are great fits for your house, it'd be a really, really good exercise. Now that I've seen your house, I'll be able to give you a little bit better guidance on this. But again, pricing is going to be a collaborative effort. I'm going to tell you the high, the low. I'm going to tell you what I would personally do, but the decision is ultimately up. This shows you where these are located. It shows you the history, the trend. This shows you all of the closed listings. That's going to show you what things are selling for. So we want to take these into context. These are the pending listings. So these are the most recently contracted properties that have just come off the market. These are great data points if they look a lot like your house. And if we have any really great pending comps, I'll call the agent. And usually I can play hot cold and figure out roughly where they are on the contract price. Here are the active listings. So there's 5 active listings right now. We don't set the price based on the active listings, but we do take them into account. These are the properties that have not sold, okay? But they're the properties that are still on the market. So if we come up with a price based on based on the pending and the closed properties, and then you have an active here that's priced lower than that, we need to really look at that and figure out why that is. There's usually an explanation. This shows you the inventory dial, and right now it's showing that you're kind of in a hot-ish to neutral market. Just understand that this time of the year, that can sometimes be misleading. And then if we look at the average days on market, it's 95 days on market. Here's something I want to pay attention to. There we go. The success rate. This is the percentage of sellers that are actually selling their properties. So what happens a lot are people will, the success rate just shows the percentage of sellers that are actually succeeding, that are actually selling. If we don't get our pricing strategy right, the repercussion is generally we're not going to sell this year. So I just want you guys to understand that. And again, this is going to be taken into account with our overall pricing strategy. But if you see properties that look like they're priced high, that doesn't mean that we should follow them. It just means that they probably didn't come in with a great pricing strategy. Make sense? I'm going to go over the listing agreement in just a second. But before we get started on it, are you guys interviewing any other agents at all? It's a great, if they tell you no, don't say it's a great idea too. But yes, we're interviewing others. I think it's a great idea. You should definitely see who's out there, see who is the best fit for you guys. If I can give you one piece of advice, please separate any pricing guidance that anybody gives you from the agent that you're talking to. And the reason that you want to do that is that we're all looking at the same data, and we want to make sure that we have strong logic behind our pricing opinions. And if somebody brings you, I think I have everything here, but if somebody brings you something compelling that I missed, can you send it to me so I can take a look at it? Awesome. And just know that I'm going to spend some time putting together a pretty detailed pricing opinion for you after the appointment. I'm not going to walk you guys through the listing agreement. I have a pretty strong opinion that it's important to go through every page of the listing agreement. Tara McGuire is arguably a better listing agent than I am, and she doesn't. But she does it the same way every time, right? And she knows that it works for her. For me, what worked really well for me was going through every paragraph very quickly. So I'm going to run through the listing agreement. This shows the parties. This shows the property. And then where I stop, they say, and these are the special provisions that we talked about. So you can terminate the agreement with 48 hours written notice and reimbursement of broker's verifiable marketing expenses. People ask me about the marketing expenses. I can tell you that in doing this for 22 years, I've only ever had one seller that fired me. And everybody else, if they exercise this, they generally have said, hey, we're going to take a pause. We're going to sell again next year. And I can tell you there's one that they decided to take a break and I sold it 4 years later. So I care a lot more about the relationship than I do about the marketing expenses, but I have that in there to protect me. The person that fired me, I was so happy to be out of that. I never even asked her for the money, but I have that in there to protect you guys. If the broker acts as an intermediary, I'm not going to double dip. That's it. I'm here to earn 3% and 3% only. And then again, if you procure the buyer through your own actions, so generally how this happens is you tell somebody at school or you tell somebody at church and you guys hammer out a deal, at which point you got really lucky. I didn't. And I don't want you to ever feel like I didn't, earn my commission. So that's why I have that provision in there. So now I'm talking to you guys. What about commission? How do you write commission? I like that, but I would say everybody should just do it the same way every time. So I'm not here to tell you that you have to use cooperating compensation or that you can't use cooperating compensation. It seems to be that the most difficult part of deciding to use cooperative or not is talking to agents after the fact. So whatever works for you when you're fielding offers and however you set that up, that's what you want to do. But just make dang sure that they understand that the highest likelihood is that they're going to pay 3% on the other side. And that's not because of collusion or anything like that. It's just simply because that's the way it is in Austin. And make sure they understand that if any offers come in that don't have 3%, that you will point that out, show them what that means. If you have my opinion, greedy agent that's trying to earn more, it doesn't mean it's a bad offer, but it just means it needs to be taken into account. If you have an agent who's trying alternative business models and they're offering less, doesn't mean they're a bad agent. It just means they're trying that out. And you just need to point out to the seller how that affects them. Has anybody had difficulty with this section at all? Awesome. I'm really glad to hear that. And then I'm going to leave the seller's disclosure notice with you. If you have any questions over this, let me know. Part of our process is that we use Seller Shield. So you'll actually fill this out online, but it's good to start looking through it. You know, it's kind of a homeworky type thing. So I like to make sure and leave it with you. So what questions can I answer? I would say 80% of the time or greater, they would say, man, you nailed it. Not nailed it like you're, but like, no, I don't have any questions. And that's a great response. But another great response is when they start peppering you with questions and you sit there and you answer as many questions as they have. Are you interviewing other agents? Or you told me you were interviewing other agents. I think that's great. When are they coming over? Awesome. When do you plan to make a decision? Great. Now you know all the important pieces of information to follow up with them. The post-appointment email, this is used super successfully. It takes a long time and you can't go run it through ChatGPT. This is one reason we're not going to be replaced by AI. And it's whenever you go through all the comps, now that you've seen the house, and you take 30 minutes to an hour and a half, however long it takes you, to go line by line on the comps and tell them why you think this one is not as nice as their house, or why this one should be adjusted for this reason. Not in the same manner that an appraiser would, but helping them narrow down what the comps mean, and then say, based on these, here's where I think the high is, here's where I think the low is. It is early in the season, so if we want to start a little bit higher, that would be fine. The market is not appreciating, so we probably don't want to go too high. Here's where I would personally price the house. You guys let me know what you think. Do you agree with me with regards to my assessment of the comps? Is there anything I'm missing? You know, so you're being very authoritative and you're guiding them, but you're not being inflexible. You're making it collaborative. I'll find some of these emails and send them over to you guys. Everybody does these the same way every time, but in a different way. And that's because they write them, that's because their own style. So, you know, if you spend 30 minutes to an hour extra on every one of these appointments in order to win 20% more, I think it's probably worth it. This is sort of new, but with the CMA tool we have, they have the ability to go in and leave comments on each property, and then you can see those and you guys can comment back the exact same way we do with buyers. If you can get them to engage in that way on the CMA, it's going to help you a lot. You're going to see that they're actively looking at it. Early indications on that are that it's going to be tough to get people to do that. It's pretty homeworky to go in and do that. And people don't like to write a whole lot, but I think it is worth encouraging them to do that. I always encourage them to go through and look at every picture of the listings. And when they do that, they're able to educate themselves in a better way and make better decisions. On the urgency side, I would say the most important thing to communicate is that this is not going to happen quickly. You know, there were times that people were like, oh, we need to be on the market in the next week. Okay, like, let me try, but we're going to have to do a whole lot of stuff. We might have to skip the stager. You know, what do we want to start cutting out of this to make it happen that quickly? So when you tell them bringing the stager in is going to be the first step, and then we're going to have a couple of weeks of stuff after that, they realize like, oh, wow, this is a process. You know, I probably should go ahead and get started. And they're curious about what the stager is going to say. So that helps a whole lot. My customer is not somebody who doesn't want to sell their house. You know, my customer is somebody that will ultimately be reasonable. It doesn't mean it's only people that are going to price it well, but it's people that will listen to reason with regard to like pricing and understand that there are consequences to different decisions.